Well, thank you, Francisco. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. We're gonna instead of the question and answers, since we are four and we only have 45 minutes, we're gonna give you bullets on Venezuela rather quickly. And to start off, I'm gonna tell you a little bit of history and the perspectives in Venezuela, and I'm gonna talk a lot about oil. So if I sound like I was talking in Houston, my apologies, but Venezuela and oil are inseparable subjects. Just a little bit of background. Venezuela had the world's fourth highest per capita income in 1958. Venezuela had a higher per capita income than Italy or Spain in 1971. Venezuela produced more oil than Saudi Arabia until 1971. In 1960, 50% of the oil trade that crossed borders, cross-border oil trade, was Venezuelan oil. So, and Venezuela today still has the world's highest oil reserves. So, Venezuela was a very big market that collapsed in the biggest collapse in history for any country not at war, as proven by the research of Ricardo Hausmann at Harvard University. So you have a country that literally had total collapse. And now, because of the incredible operation that took Maduro out of the country, there is a window to recover the country. So that's where we're at now. To give you an idea, Venezuela's auto market today is exactly the same size as Venezuela's auto market was in 1950. And that's after the market quadrupled over the last 3 years. So that's the size of the collapse. You have a country of 30 million people that's approximately the size, the GDP size is about the same as Panama, a country of less than 5 million people. Okay? Now, the oil sector. Others here will tell you the details of what are the challenges in many ways for investment and in terms of the rule of law and so forth. But I want to concentrate on the potential recovery. There will need to be a legitimate government elected eventually for the potential of the country to restart. There will need to be rule of law. And in the case of the oil sector, there will need to be even probably treaties with the U.S. Venezuela, for example, still has a valid treaty, investment protection treaty with Holland. And in that investment protection that Dutch companies have, give it great advantages for political upheaval. And it gave them great advantages for political upheaval during the last decade or 2 decades of Chavista rule. The U.S. actually rejected an investment protection treaty in 1999. Hugo Chavez then gave the American. I was involved. I was president of the U.S. Venezuela Business Council back in 1999. So I'm telling you this from first-hand experience. Hugo Chavez offered the U.S. To sign one of two treaties that negotiations had been finalized in the previous government. It was a double taxation treaty or an investment protection treaty. He said, I'm not going to give you both. I'm going to sign one of those treaties. And it was the U.S. administration that chose the double taxation treaty instead of the investment protection treaty. But it will need measures like that for the actual investment potential to occur. You have read probably a lot in the press about the the potential of the oil industry, and without the oil industry, without the oil industry's potential being realized, Venezuela will remain a very small economy, very, very far from not from where it was in 1971 or 1960, from where it was in 2014. So to expand a little bit about that, the Secretary of Energy, the U.S. Secretary of Energy, recently visited Caracas, and after visiting Caracas, he announced that Venezuela's oil production would increase or will increase between 30 and 40% within the next 12 months. That's a 400,000 barrel a day increase. It's a huge amount if you put it in global terms. That would be about 10% of Russia's total exports in oil. So Venezuela would produce an additional 400,000 that is equivalent to 10% of Russia's exports, okay, in oil, in 12 months. Back in 1998, before Hugo Chavez took power, PDVSA, the national oil company, was the most profitable oil company on the planet, measured in terms of return on capital employed. It was a very well-managed company. And back then, the company was in the midst of a 7-year plan to double production by 2005 to 6 million barrels a day. Now, 6 million barrels a day is the amount that Saudi Arabia exports, because they have a 5 million barrel internal market. So they export 6 million barrels a day. Venezuela's internal market at peak was only about 600,000 barrels a day. So that means 5.5 million barrels almost would have come out of Venezuela as exports. That would mean that if the plan had been finalized, Venezuela would be exporting today as much oil as Saudi Arabia. And Venezuela's internal market is small. If you're curious, it's because Venezuela almost never used oil for electricity. It has a huge hydroelectric installations around the country. So anyway, the potential now is, I mean, if you think about it, PDVSA was going to double production from 3 million to 6 million in 7 years. And they were investing in 1998 $9 billion a year for that plan. And there was, in addition, investment by the international oil companies it associated with in those days. Now, the situation now is different. The installations are decayed, and it will take much longer to get to high investment figures. But in my opinion, the figures we have been seeing published in the press are very conservative. If in the oil industry, there is a difference between what is called a brownfield versus a greenfield. A greenfield is what's going on in Guyana. In Guyana, you have to, there's oil in that area, but you have to still explore and drill and try to hit the right spot in your drilling. That's a greenfield. In Venezuela, everybody knows exactly where the oil is, and there are wells already in those places. The difference is now that you have to pretty much revive those fields. So it's a different kind of investment. It's a lot less investment. Venezuela already has huge ports for oil exploration. Venezuela has distribution. It has the pipeline network. It has all of the infrastructure you need for high volume exports. What it needs is bring that to the 21st century standards and basically put them back to work at a proper standard. So if the reforms that Sadi will talk later about are implemented, if American companies and international companies are allowed to own 100% of the fields through a concession law or any kind of regulation that allows them to control 100% of the investment, you would have investments that Venezuela could pretty much almost treble its production in probably 5 to 6 years, its current productions, and it could in a decade or less reach numbers of 4 or 5 or even higher millions of barrels a day, which will be a geopolitical earthquake in the world. I mean, you got to have a country that's reaching Saudi levels of exports. Now, nobody's going to invest $200 billion in 5 years in a country that you are not sure you're going to get your money back. So that's the key question. Now, the oil boom that will come, because this will happen sooner or later. I mean, the changes that the U.S. is pushing will eventually come through. The question is how quick, what exactly is the administration's plan, how the transition is going to work. But that boom is going to come, and that boom is going to generate a huge boom in the rest of the Venezuelan economy. The collateral businesses, I mean, from food services to hotels to car sales, the collateral growth is going to be tremendous. So in terms of potential, I think I'm ending here, probably took over my time. But that's as much as I can say. If anybody wants me to ask a question, if you think I'm too optimistic, but provided the right legal framework and political framework is in place, you're going to have a country that's going to break probably all records to date in terms of GDP percentage growth. I mean, the 9% a year that you saw in China for a decade and things like that are going to be small potatoes in terms of the percentages that the Venezuelan economy will grow. But you need that framework and you need that political change. Now, I'm sorry, Carlos.
No, Luis. Thank you, Luis.
Atilano. Sorry to call you.
Yeah, it's okay. It's my father. So you're my father. So it's great. So I'm not as bullish as you are, but I'll go back and break with the statement that right now Venezuela has stabilized, but stabilization does not equal. I mean, we have not seen the country has stabilized, but that doesn't mean that the circumstances are there for future growth yet, right? We have seen in Venezuela, as for the economy, and I'll give you a little bit of background of what Mercantil is. I work for Mercantil, and Mercantil is a century-old financial institution in Venezuela, and we have had businesses here in Florida that we spun off in 2017. That business, now it's a separate business. You guys probably have seen it. It's called Amaret Bank. But in Venezuela, we continue to have one of the 2-3 largest banks in Venezuela. And yes, we have a unique position as we have still a very strong position on the ground in Venezuela, and we can see what's really going on there. And we have also, over time, we moved our financial hub or financial holding company to Panama. We invested in Panama. Now we're a Panamanian bank, a strong Panamanian bank. And with that said, just to talk a little bit about the economy, right? What Luis mentioned, Venezuela at its peak was around $350 billion economy. That collapsed to $80 to $100 billion not too long ago. We have been through a cycle of hyperinflation, which stopped in, I think, 2017, somewhere along those lines. But that means the economy has stabilized. But I mean, there's no. Actually, we don't see a moment where Venezuela is in the path of being able to move forward and start growing, right? So when you look at that and what you see, what has been driving the Venezuelan economy over this past years has been oil, has been remittances, has been the basically the dollarization and imports. And of course, that has given the economy a stable ground. But for that, you need, in order for the economy to grow, you need to have intermediation, right? So you need to have the financial system to push forward. And what we've seen in the financial system in Venezuela is that it has collapsed with the economy. Uh, the financial system now, it's around $10 billion. I mean, about the size of what the bank here in Florida used to be. 50% of that financial system, it's owned by the government, or it's controlled by the government. The four largest banks, one of them, us, only they control about 40% of those assets. Still, those and of course there's regulatory constraints. For every dollar that comes into the banking system, you can only lend 30 cents, right? So there are lots of constraints out there that still need to be taken care of before we see a real recovery in the ability for people that want to come into Venezuela to invest. The same goes for the for capital markets, right? Capital markets in Venezuela are non-existent. The Venezuelan stock exchange average daily volume is 150K, when at some point in the 90s was $40 million. New issuance of debt in Venezuela are $50 million. Real growth and a path forward. What Luis is saying, we need to have a strong financial system, strong capital markets to be able to allow some of these investors to come in and be able to deploy that capital in Venezuela. So there are great challenges out there that still need to occur. And for us as a Venezuelan financial institution, what we see is that we were at one of these roundtables with investors last week, and they were telling us, what does success look like for Venezuela over the next 3-6 months? And it's not basically GDP growth, is signaling, is what we see in some of those changes that need to happen in Venezuela and the Venezuelan financial sector in order for people to come in and invest and deploy capital. And some of those are, there has to be a regulatory change in the financial sector. There needs to be a comeback from the development banks to Venezuela. Venezuela needs to be able to tap into international capital markets. All these things need to happen before we see real sustained growth for Venezuela. Again, we're there. We're bullish. We understand the opportunity for Venezuela. We've been there. We have a bank there that has 3,000 employees, 180 branches, and 6 million clients. But banks there have become real transactors. There's no real credit is not there for SMEs, for industry to be able to push the country to grow. So we believe that there's still room to grow. If you're an investor and you're thinking of coming to Venezuela, I think you should look at those signals and think about what are some of the things that I should look into before I go in there? Because if you want to put in $1 there today, it's going to be extremely difficult. Everyone wants to come in, but I think we need to wait a little bit, see how the situation pans out. I don't know what's going to happen on the political side, but there are lots of reforms, and I think sorry, you're going to talk about that, and I'll let you guys go through with that. But I think that's where we are.
Thank you very much, Atilano. Well, yes, as we have listened, there is a history of success in the first part of the 20th century of Venezuela that we all know. And there is a huge history of destruction in the beginning on these 26 years that has happened to Venezuela under the so-called 21st century socialism model. So, but it was not only a socio-political destruction, it was a total institutional meltdown. And this is very important because that's the reason, because we became an hemispheric threat. And that's the reason of the decision of President Trump and his administration to take Maduro to face justice. It was not because of the problem in the economy. It was because we became an hemispheric problem, an hemispheric threat. So having said that, and knowing that we are in the first part of a transition, actually 54 days only. This is for 54 days, and we are every day looking to news about Venezuela. And that give us a hint of why everybody is so interested in Venezuela. There has been only 54 days and we want a huge transformation. And the reason is because there is a huge potential. But as Atilano said, and also Luis plays on his speech, we have to change a lot of things. And this is not something we are realizing today, because we have been working on this for many years. And we have a roadmap for that. And that roadmap is called Plan Venezuela Tierra de Gracia. Venezuela, Land of Grace. That's the name of our plan. And our plan it's more than a program of a government. It's actually a new social contract based on liberty, and it has 3 unwavering pillars. The first one is what we call the free development of the individual, because we are prioritizing human dignity and eliminating this kind of state dependency we have seen. Second, a subsidiary state, redefining the role of the state and allowing those who know how to run the economy to do it. The state has to focus on rule of law, justice, security, of course, opening opportunities, but it's not the economy side of the society that it has to be into. And of course, the third pillar is a free market economy with a robust system of property rights, and of course, creating a friendly environment for investment, for creation, for production, because this is the real way to eliminate poverty in a sustainable way. So having these 3 pillars, and it has many things, I will focus only on the economic I will give you a few, how can I say, brush strokes on the economic sphere. And in the economic sphere, there is a program called expansive stabilization. Why? Because we have to stop the bleeding, but we cannot have a stabilization in a way that create a higher recession. We have, in the macroeconomic sphere, we talk about stability. And actually what we are talking is a disciplined way of dealing with the state. In the fiscal area, we are talking about optimizing the size of the state. That means eliminating parallel structures that are of the public sector, but that also means to removing the burden of more than 1,000 loss-making companies in the hand of the state. They all have to be privatized in a transparent and competitive way. And this is very important because these are places where private investors are invited to. There are many areas in this for investment opportunities here. We were talking also about monetary sanity. We're talking about the independence of the central bank, which is guaranteed in the Constitution but violated every day with each reforms that has been done legally. And the financial sector is one of the has suffered the most about it because they had to carry the burden of the restrictive policies on the monetary side. And that means also bimonetarism. We are keeping the dollar as a currency to be used so Venezuelans could save contract and pay in US dollars, in any currency, by the way, but it will be basically the US dollars. And last but not least, a restructuring and renegotiating program of our public debt. And that will be done with the support of multilateral organizations, but also asking them support to attend the humanitarian crisis, but simultaneously to open, to invest, to get funds for important infrastructure investment plan. And this is another issue that is open to private sector, but because this is not to be carried on by the public sector, but by the private one. So each time I show you a bottleneck or a problem, it will be turned into an opportunity for the private sector to invest. And this is what I want you to understand. All the links that nowadays in the change of production are missing, those are opportunities. Those will be opportunities under the democratic regime, government. And the other part, which is very important, all what is related to the expansive dimension of the economic plan, because I told you it's expansive stabilization. This second part, it's related to the kind of situation of the economy. It has been said the economy shrunk by 70%, the financial sector by 80%. The whole financial sector cannot support the imports of a big company if they need it, because it couldn't, given the assets they have. So Venezuela must grow at important rates and for a sustainable period of time, because that's the success. That's the real story of success, growth. And of course, we have Venezuela is like a giant dormant. And it has been important in the past, but never exploded completely because of the participation of the state. It has always been controlled. And now what we want is to open it to all the private sector. And in oil, our program is to open it completely, the whole industry, upstream, midstream, downstream, to the private sector. We are talking about 19% of world's reserves, and they will be able to be exploited. In gas, Venezuela has 40% of Latin American free gas reserves, and for that, and 4 times that amount in associated with oil. So this will be an area that has never been exploited enough, but it will boost also petrochemical industry. We have in the south of the country what we call a perfect multifecta, which is that we have great deposit of iron and bauxite, but we have hydropower supply that has to be, updated, mighty rivers, and a geostrategic position. So here you can create the world greenest steel in the world, because the possibilities are there. But after recovering the energy, it will be not only used for consumption and for the industry, but the new tech frontier, because that's the possibility that is needed for AI, for data centers, for crypto mining. So we are talking to jump ahead in the new technologies of the 21st century. And I can keep talking about the exuberant nature that we have, the pristine coastline and how it can be exploited by tourism, or the amount of the huge amount of hectares that could be used for niches like cacao, cafe, some spirits, and so on. And I can go on and go on, and I can give you details if you want later. But what I mean, we have zillions of opportunity, and they are there. We already have a proven know-how to do some things like that. So we can do it again, and much better, given the new perspective we are looking at in this new kind of government. And yes, we are in a transition. But we are not yet there. And I agree with you. We are not yet there. And what we need to be there? We need first legitimacy. Yes, we need elections in which and it has to be flawless. We need justice. We need security. And last but not least, we need a complete institutional framework with rule of law, with separation of powers, with control of corruption. And I know in that moment, everybody will come. There has been done a few changes, not enough. Good sign, not enough. But my suggestion, keep on the loop, look into Venezuela, because soon it will be a huge opportunity for investment.
Thank you very much. Since I have the responsibility to close off the panel, after very good presentations in different ways, I will try to be very practical and concrete to summarize what was said before, but to put a vision forward for Venezuela. For those of you who are interested in investing in Venezuela, I think there is two different investment theses. There is the investment thesis that I think was mentioned before, which is that if you lose 70% of your GDP, all assets are extremely undervalued, underused, easy for you to join this market. In Venezuela, we lost 70% of our GDP, 40 months of hyperinflation, oil, 75% of the production is down. So in that context, Venezuela, it is the biggest economic collapse in the history of any country without war, but at the same time then is the biggest economic opportunity and recovery of our generation if the right reforms are implemented and the right business people come to the country to rebuild the country. Because we need good policies, but we also need good business people who believe in democracy, who believe in freedom. So that's the first investment thesis, is a recovery thesis. The second thesis is much more related and focused on energy. As you know, in the next decade, the consumption of energy will double in the US, but the same in Europe. The rise of data centers, the increase of geopolitical tensions, and the increase in the electrification of our industry will have such an incredible demand of energy. And what is the country that has the greatest amount of energy abundance in our region? Venezuela. It was mentioned oil, but the same is with mining, the same is with production of hydro capabilities. In every single way, Venezuela can become the supplier of energy of the hemisphere. From that perspective, I also have a geopolitical thesis of why Venezuela will succeed. Because the world is becoming fragmented, is changing. And the Western Hemisphere is now more than ever an American, a United States-led Western Hemisphere. And from that perspective, the failure of Venezuela, I don't think, is an option when it comes to the geopolitical strategy of this country. So what are the barriers then for all of you then to invest in Venezuela? It's a matter of very particular expertise. Is first of all, most importantly, localized expertise on people that understand Venezuela, people that understand which assets you can invest in Venezuela, people that understand the challenges when it comes to the lack of institutions, lack of property rights enforcement. There is assets who have different property rights claims in Venezuela. So you have that issue. You also had the compliance nightmare that means investing in Venezuela because of the sanctions, anti-money laundering laws, etc. So if Venezuela becomes a normal country again, there will be a relaxation of this. But as you know, in banking, the compliance is something that is not only about the real laws, but it's also about the perception that banking institutions have when dealing with certain jurisdictions of type of assets. So there is those constraints. As Sari mentioned before, every constraint, domestic constraint in Venezuela is an investment opportunity. For example, Luis and I, we were talking this week about Venezuela. How can Venezuela be rebuilt with the current electrical system? It cannot. Right now, Venezuela, even though we lost 30% of our population, the reality is that most people don't have electricity in their houses or in their business. So imagine a scenario in which we bring, I don't know, 30, $40 billion of investing. The electrical capacity of the country will not support that. Well, that's a business opportunity. And with that, you have pretty much everything, every infrastructure, every type of assets. The banking sector, 80% is down. That's why the stable coins are taking over all these assets. So since I know that we are running out of time, for anybody who is interested on the Venezuela case study from an academic perspective, from a reform perspective, from a business perspective, come talk to us. We are extremely interested. We are personally vested on the rebuilding of our country. I am somebody that was born in the middle of the socialist revolution in Venezuela. Everything I saw my entire life was pain, misery, poverty in my country. I'm tired of hearing about Venezuela as a collapse story. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my children. I want that in 10 years, Venezuela becomes a success economic miracle, the biggest one of our generation. And for that, we need not only people that want to do reforms, people that want to lead reforms, but we need principled business people to come to Venezuela. Thank you very much.